Namaskaram to everyone. I think we missed 1 week session because of the festive season of Deepavali. Prior to that, we spoke about the process of reflection, prior to which the verses 6 and 7, we spoke about the detail of attachment. Verse 6 speaks about attachment to the physical body. Verse 7, attachment to the mind. And the 8th verse we'll soon get into speaks about the attachment to the intellect. Now, throughout the Shastras, throughout the scriptural study, throughout the wisdom we gain from the masters, we are all alive. We are encouraged to live a life of detachment. Attachment and detachment are in fact two sides of the same coin. When you develop an attachment to the higher, you will develop a detachment to the lower. And you keep applying this principle right through the journey as you keep evolving at whatever stage you are in your life. It is very natural that you develop an attachment to that you're engaged with, that you're associating with, that you're involved with. That's but a natural phenomenon. The scriptures are consciously trying to appeal to us to entertain a higher thought so that you get attached, you get anchored onto something higher with the only objective of appealing to raise your thought to something beyond it is so that you remain unaffected, you remain unperturbed, you don't get disturbed by the activities or the realms you belong to. For example, I'm with my family. As long as I'm with my family, and if my thoughts are confined to my family, to my child, to my wife, to my parents, to my immediate family, if I'm attached to them, which would be a natural course of action, whatever happens and transpires within the family circle of the difference of emotions, the difference of opinions, the difference of views, the clash of interests, invariably would have a phenomenon toll on my mental ability. I lose the charm of life with reference to the family. And not only I've lost the charm of life with reference to the family, that mental inability to handle life starts spreading, starts percolating to other spheres of my roles, and I lose the ability to enjoy, to eke the most out of life. It's like a disease. It starts with one and spreads to other. It's like cancer. Many a time when cancer finds itself in a human body at some point, it is not, what do you call that, the term? It is not, I'm lost for words here. Invariably it spreads, isn't it? They call it localized. Is that the word? Invariably it is not localized. It spreads. Malignant, yes. It destroys every other cell. It spreads like a disease. So what causes agitation should be contained to that source alone. It should not spread and destroy the peace and charm over other activities that you get engaged in. Now, what we are trying to get at is, in order to live a life of charm, of peace and happiness, you must operate at the lower with your thoughts anchored and established in the higher. This is the modus operandi you must learn to operate in life. You're operating in the lower, but your thoughts are well anchored onto the higher. This, in short, is nothing but detachment. And when you are detached, you are not affected by all that you are dealing with. I give a simple clarification and I think I've given an example, but it's worth quickly mentioning it so we establish that understanding. Your physical body, your mind and intellect are constantly identifying with the world, and the world that you're identifying it is constantly subjected to change. A simple concept, but very profound if you understand it. The individual, the body, mind, and intellect develops an attachment to the things and beings in the world. The nature of things and beings in the world is subjected to change. And as we said earlier, when you get attached to something, you become the very object of attachment. Isn't it? When you're attached to anything, you become the very object of attachment. So what happens when you're attached to things and beings, and when they are subjected to change, you too, your physical body, your mind and intellect also are subjected to change. Now, if you ask me, sir, so what? So what if I'm subjected to change? My question is, what happens if you are subjected to change? What happens if you're subjected to change? A simple question. Rajiv ji, what happens if you're subjected to change?
Yeah, it causes a disturbance, and you may lose your focus on the higher.
Focus on the higher is never there, and since you lost that focus. But by subjecting to change, in other words, is it causes. What did you say, sir? What does change cause?
Disturbance.
How
Disturbance.
does change cause disturbance?
Because you are getting away from your established routine, I guess.
Can you explain further? How does change cause disturbance?
I mean, change is change. Whatever is a change, you are not going to be that is just getting you distracted or disturbance from your regular ways, the way you have been so far if the change had not occurred.
Okay. All right. Okay. I get what you're saying. Anybody else? Yes, Vijay Raghavanji.
The mind is struggling to cope with the change and occupied with that process.
But what does change do to you?
Disturbance, panic, and the inability to concentrate on anything else.
Can you give an example? How does disturbance arise from change?
Because it's unknown situation, constantly we are trying to adapt to it and react to it. And in that process, it occupies more of his mind, and the insecurity and unhappiness. Not unhappiness is a strong thing, I suppose.
You're not wrong. You can go ahead. You can become more.
If you're not able to cope with it, then there is insecurity and unhappiness.
Yeah.
So, and if you are able to cope with it, you're at that game all the time.
Yeah. So in fact, you're very right. You're very right. But the sad part is you're not able to predict that change, because in fact, the world, as we know, if philosophically, the world is said to be, another word is change. The definition of the world is change. And if you are able to predict, then you can play the game of life. You can't predict the game of life. You can't predict the patterns of emotions in people. You can't predict the stock market. You can't predict the weather. You can't predict anything out there, can we? It's subject to change. Very true, sir. Yeah, Miki ji.
Yeah, sorry, Guruji. I was reminded, I was reading recently about the great golfer Tiger Woods. And when he was a young kid and he was practicing, his father used to be his coach and stand behind him. And just before he was about to hit the ball, he would make a noise. So he would either drop the golf bag or he used to sneeze very loudly. And that used to irritate the boy a lot. But over time, his father said it made him mentally very strong, the strongest mental golfer, because nothing could disturb him. So it was just a sort of simulation exercise, struck me as a parallel to what you were saying.
Very interesting. Yeah. It's like, you know, I don't know whether you've heard about it, you know, when certain countries, cricketing nations, especially from the West, whether be it, when I say foreign playing nations, not the Asian countries, for example, let it be Australia or England or South Africa, you know, when they tour India, you know, one of the biggest things they have to deal with playing in India against India is the huge crowd and the noise. It's a constant buzz, they say. And they say it gets to them and it's very difficult to concentrate on what you're doing. Because when you're playing in England or playing in countries like there you have 100,000 people sitting, but you don't have the euphoria. You don't have that sound, that you don't have that noise. Now, I'm not saying which is right, which is wrong. I'm just analyzing. And in fact, these teams practice with noise. Stimulated noise. So they practice, they go to in their own backyards, or they go to a different place and practice with sounds, so that when they come, they're able to in tune to that particular tour, you know. It's very, very interesting. When I heard that long ago, you know, it was very interesting how they're not able to adapt to it, you know. But change causes a lot of agitation. You must relate the agitation coming within to the world out there. So if you identify with the changing world, you're bound to go through the change, which is bound to go through agitations. Now, how can you escape this constant flux that you're subjected to, whether be at the physical level, whether be the mental level, whether be the intellectual level? How can you immune yourself from being subject to the change, which is nothing but subject to sorrow and suffering? What we are told is identify with the changeless entity. There is a changeless entity, the Atman, the truth, the reality. The moment you shift your focus to the Atman, to the self within, the core of your personality, again, the same principle applies. You are attached, whatever you're attached to, you become that object of attachment. So when you become that object of attachment, you borrow the traits of that which you're attached to. And the only thing that doesn't change is the Atman. Atman is like the anvil on which the blacksmith goes about molding different tools. The tools go through the change because they are being molded on the anvil. The anvil remains changeless. So the self in us, the Atman in us, is the changeless entity. So you must be conscious of this, that there is the change and the changeless. And if I identify with change, I am subjected to change. If I switch my attention to the changeless, I remain unaffected by the change. And that's what we're trying to convey. So 6 and 7 spoke about attachment to the body. The 7th verse, the very famous verse, just quick recap. He said, as a child, you're attached to toys. Balastavat krida saktaha, tarunastavat taruni saktaha, vriddhastavat chinta saktaha, parame brahmani kopina saktaha. Hardly anybody is attached to the higher. And this is what is appeal. If you switch your focus to the reality, to the self, to the higher, you're operating in the lower, but attuned to the higher at all times. So you will remain unaffected, unperturbed You will carry on your duties to the best. It brings the best out of you because you are able to maintain that inner charm within. You're not affected by all that's happening. You play the game to the best. You're not affected by winning or losing. You're playing with the stock market, but you're not affected by profit or loss. You're doing your work. You're not interested in praise or censure. You're giving all your love you can, but you're not expecting any love. Or you're not affected by hatred. You're not affected. You remain calm and cool. You remain balanced, equanimous. You remain equipoised. Why? Because you have detached yourself from the external and you have attached yourself to the internal. So the appeal to us is to switch your focus from the outside to the inside so that it brings the best out of anything that you do. And this is the application we're talking about. This is the applicability. This is the applied philosophy. You should be able to bring this principle, apply it into anything that you're doing. Disregard the world, yet you're operating in that realm, but you're mentally connected to the higher. So that mental association with the higher insulates you from the lower. But now we are not insulated to what's happening in the lower. And I keep saying this. We are like the butter paper. So we should be like the butter paper, not the blotting paper. The blotting paper is that which absorbs everything and then it makes a mess of itself. But if you're like the butter paper, you're there, yet you're not there. You're not affected. It doesn't absorb anything. You're in it. I'm with the family. I play the role as a family member. And yet when your head hits the pillow, you have a sound sleep. You could have had a terrible emotional turmoil with the family, but nothing affects you. You can be at the director of your organization or chairman of an organization. You have to deal with many challenges. You come back home, you're switched off. You absolutely know it doesn't affect you the next role that you're playing. So what happens is even if there is any problem, it's only contained to that role. It doesn't spread to other roles. Hirenji, you're following what I'm saying?
Yeah, yes, sir. Can I add a question there?
See, something
Could
told
there
me
be
that
a-
something is there. That's the reason.
No, could there be a point that I get to a point that where I don't care anymore, whatever happens? So that not caring attitude is probably not good, definitely. So how do you handle that?
A very pertinent question in the context, So we are talking about to develop a spirit of detachment and yet play your role as you're obliged to, isn't it? You have an obligation to play a role and you're expected to bring the best out of the roles that you play, and yet you're expected to remain calm and keep a charm, isn't it? And
Yes,
that is
agreed.
detachment. Now, that is known as sattva. All what we spoke about, so that the detachment quotient in each individual, all of us are detached, but there's a certain quotient. And that quotient is best understood as your sattvic quotient. Sattva, you've heard of the word sattva. We have spoken about it before. So that is your sattva. Now, rajas is exactly the opposite of it, is where you are very hyperactive. A state where you get very involved, you get carried away, you become very emotional. Everything that you do torments you. It hurts your mental composure. You lose your sanity down the line. You're affected. That is a state of rajas. It's because of your extreme attachment or involvement. That's rajas. And then the third, which you're talking about, is where you are sort of, I don't care attitude. I'm not bothered. Why should I be interested in something? I don't care. I'm not interested. You don't want to spare a thought or a moment to ponder over things. You just dismiss it off. That an attitude of resignation, an attitude of disinterest or unconcernedness is known as tamas. And I don't think we should develop that attitude of don't care attitude. And okay, when does one slip into this state of don't care? We all do slip into this state because there's a proportion of tamas also in us, isn't it? So there are certain times you slip into that attitude to something which you can't afford to. Sometimes if your children are causing too much of emotional turmoil to you, and there's a lot of clash of views and clash of interests, a point of time will come and say, I don't care, man, you do what you want to do. Don't we say that? Don't we react that way?
Yes.
Why does it happen? That's not acceptable, isn't it? Is it acceptable that you behave with, you interact or you express an attitude of unconcern? But why does one end up behaving like that? Even going along with the example, let's say there's a difference of view with your children. There can be difference of opinion. And what they think is right is what you think is right. That's the difference of opinion. But that doesn't mean you get into this spirit of, I don't care, man, you do what you want to do. Enough is enough. I've done so much. And yet you have no value. You're not grateful. You're not thankful for it. I don't know what to say to you all. So you almost give up. You get fed up. Almost to a point where relationship snaps. That's an attitude of unconcern. That's tamas. Why one gets into it? What is it that has resulted in such a extreme measure?
Because we end up setting up some expectation, and when we don't meet that expectation, then we at some point of time you snap out of it.
Extreme expectation. Rajas is nothing but a wrong relationship. Remember this. Attachment, when you develop an attachment to something, even sticking with the example of a parent and a child, there's an extreme attachment here. So the parent is extremely attached to the child. So in that, as you rightly said, there's an expectation. And that expectation invariably is, how have we defined attachment with reference to emotion?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, if you have an answer, please. Otherwise, anybody
No,
else? No idea?
I don't. I'd like to listen from somebody.
All right. Okay. Srinivas Reddy Garu, do you remember this, sir? Been missing you for a while, sir. I develop attachment, it looks like, because the moment you miss attachment. So I was been just thinking, where are you? And suddenly glad you came back to the classes.
Yes, sometimes detachment brings the love. So, sorry, could you please repeat once again the question? Emotion with the.
See, I was trying to, the question I was asking is, how do you explain attachment with reference to emotion in the context of a parent developing an attachment to the child? It comes to a point where, as I've said, you get fed up and then you get into that mode of resignation. You don't want to, because it led a lot of disappointment. So very hurtful. So I was trying to get to the root of that problem by asking, how do you define attachment with reference to emotion?
emotions, I think here, as one of the gentlemen said, that we create an expectations. So first and most, where the bonding starts, the expectations from as a loving expectation, or it could be an authority of expectation. But in the incident of a case study which we are mentioning, it's more of a parent and child. You expect quite a lot from the children, and in the end, I mean to say, you created one expectations. I don't think we can blame someone for that.
Yeah.
And in the end, results are not to the expected levels. That's where the dissatisfactions, the way the emotion starts growing within ourselves. So I don't think we blame others. I think we need to be very clear in our expectations. Is it really realistic? Is it really can be understanding the emotions of others, and we create an expectation? Could be other way of bridging the gap between emotion and expectations. That could be my perception there.
Okay. All right. Okay. I will still be happy to hear anyone. Yeah, BHAJAGOVINDam.
Guruji, is it that as a parent, so long as we are expecting the child to behave in a certain way based on our input, we are attached to the behavior. But if you continue to do what you're supposed to do, what your dharma is, without, flinching, without liking or not liking it, but you continue to do that, then won't it become less of attachment?
It does, yes.
But in the sense, what I mean is, possible difference is that you continue to do what you're supposed to do without worrying whether you like it, not like it. But because you are so expected to do, and you feel that it is right. But if the child does not respond fully and you are expecting a certain response, then you get into trouble, into disappointments and disturbances.
Yes.
So, which is true, isn't it, Guruji, isn't it true of anything? So long as you take up anything, you do it to the best of your ability without worrying what happens, in which case you're not attached to it?
Correct. I'm only trying to analyze the principle. It's applicable to any walk of life. It's applicable. But as long as you establish a relationship of attachment, which is to feed your own expectations, it is bound to lead you to disappointments, and relationships snap today. Today, we don't have a healthy relationship. I'm not talking about your workplace or distant relationships. I'm talking the closest of relationships have become very sour all over the world. We're not able to have a pure relationship. So the closest of people cause the greatest of emotional turmoil. And all it's happening in the name of love. You say, I love you so much, you love me so much, and yet there's so much of turmoil. I would question, is that true love? I tell you,
I think expectations are more really than the pure love part of it.
There is no love at all. Let me be very pertinent with it. That is what I'm saying. That's what my question is. How do you define attachment with reference to emotion? Yeah, this is a very pertinent discussion because it relates to our life day in and day out. Setuji, you wanted to say something, please?
This parents-children relationship, the love actually becomes infatuation, and they start doing emotional blackmail to children, and when that doesn't succeed, the relationship gets snapped.
Correct. But what is it that spoils the relationship?
That's the attachment. Attachment leads to, see, they call it love, but it is infatuation.
It's infatuation.
And they emotionally blackmail child.
Yeah. Very true. Very beautifully captured. Very, very well said. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, Miki ji.
Yeah, so, Guruji, not sure what I'm talking about, but if you're attached, for example, if you want to be constantly joyful or happy, it's a problem because that's not a natural state somehow. And then sometimes
I'm
the
sorry.
fear of not
Sorry.
being in that state.
Mickey, can you come again to that statement, please? How you said it?
You talked about the attachment with relation to emotions. And I felt that if you take the primary emotions, say sadness and happiness, as two examples, you might be very attached to the idea of being happy, which is not natural because it's not a constant state anyway. And two things can happen. One is that the fear of not being happy, you then kind of give up, like you will not exercise, you will not, sorry.
But I'm sorry, I'm just sorry to interrupt here, but my clarification to that, I'm not able to go beyond that statement. That's why I thought I heard you correctly. I requested you to repeat that sentence. You said happiness is not a natural state?
No, it is. What I'm saying is that to be constantly happy and to have no unhappiness in your life or no sadness in your life is not natural. And I feel
when
that
when you say not natural means, is it not your natural state? Is that what you're intending to say?
What I'm trying to say is that you can have an unnatural sense of happiness, which is it's not real. I mean, and in order to seek that, you're constantly either giving up or you're deluding yourself. So I guess what I was saying was that if you're realistic, however, you're a little bit more detached and you don't care so much about the immediate pain and the sorrow, then you can continue on a more stable basis without either being tempted to give up or getting so emotional that you're not able to. So apologies, I'm being a little confused, I realize, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that you have to rise above your emotions.
Absolutely. Yes. So you can't choose to get involved and get perturbed, nor can you choose to remain indifferent.
To give up,
or give up. And this is what we are constantly switching from. Either we get too carried away, pay the price, and we withdraw. And when we realize we withdraw, we lose that emotion, we go back again and get hurt again. So even when we are playing with emotions or in this context, we are either getting too carried away or to switch off, either switch on, switch off. You're not able to maintain that beautiful equanimous relationship, a harmonious relationship. Mickey ji, in fact, to that point which I clarified, wouldn't you agree that health is our natural state?
I would agree with that. Yes, it is.
But yet there are times all of us fall sick, we lose our natural state, and it could be a short, it could be a prolonged illness, but then you do come out of it, isn't it?
True.
Medicine and healing helps us to come back to our natural state. And when we are in those moments of ill health, we are sick of ourselves, aren't we? You can't accept the fact that you're just not your normal self. And it's very, very discomforting. Uneasiness comes in, isn't it? It could be a mild running nose, it could be a mild headache or a sore throat is enough to just put you off your normal self because that's not your natural state. Exactly the same way, peace and happiness is your natural state. It's just that we are not tapped that art of keeping that composure and balance at all times. So therefore, we are subjected to the crusts and troughs, the ups and downs. And we have got so used to it, we do not know what it is to keep that charm throughout. Isn't it? So it is not wrong to say health and happiness is our natural state at the physical and mental level, isn't it?
Right, absolutely.
And how do you achieve that is only by living a life of detachment. That if we are able to connect that, so synonymous to happiness is detachment. So if you establish a relationship based on detachment, you will find yourself peaceful and happy in and through all that's happening, all the turmoil in the relationship. It will not affect you. You still have your charm about it because you have not established a selfish relationship. This is the key I was looking at, which I think Harishji had beautifully captured. Yes, Harish ji, you want to clarify something here?
Guruji, you have said it more eloquently than I could have. But yes, what I was referring to is what you have said in earlier classes and taught us, which is that you must look at what differentiates any a pure emotion is very pure. What the impurity is your attachments, and what is this caused by? This is caused by the intent behind the emotion. And the intent could be defined in three ways. One is it's a selfish intent, which means it has to do with my own personal gain. It is a unselfish, meaning there is still a gain, but it is not personal, right? Right? And that it brings you to the intermediate stage of a higher cause. And then there is a selfless intent where there is no intent because it is beyond all the worldly things which are subject to change. Because by definition, the moment you have a certain level, and if you say this is not the ultimate, then there is something more.
Yeah.
So similarly, if this is, let's say, if you can put it mathematically, if this is not 100 desire, but you brought it down to 20, the fact that you're saying it is 20 means there is 19 others or whatever, you know. So there is something more. The moment you reach that zero is what is the ultimate state. That is the progression. So you keep from the pure emotion or the pure action, keep removing the selfishness of the intent, whether in action or in emotion, and gradually move through unselfishness to a selfless. I'm sorry.
No, you're very right. Absolutely right. So the equation which you have actually presented is attachment with reference to emotion was the question, and to spell it out, which you also spelt it, is love plus selfishness. Hirenji, when your love, which is pure, is adulterated with your selfishness, it becomes attachment. And what ruptures a relationship is your own selfish relationship, which is attachment, which is rajas. And when you can't take that agitation anymore, you just withdraw into an act of resignation, which is tamas, where you're unconcerned. Now, the entire beauty of this study is to develop an attitude of detachment where you carry on your duties and responsibilities, but remain a spirit of detachment inwardly. You're not affected, but you still have all the love you can give to your near and dear. But the consequences means whether that love is reciprocated, whether somebody is grateful or thankful, whether they even acknowledge what that's come their way. You don't have an expectation. But it is not, as Setaramaji said, it should not be an infatuation. Infatuation is selfish relationship. You will do all what is needed if it is right. Just because it is your child, you wouldn't inundate them with all that conveniences and comforts and wealth and destroy them. Because they don't know the value of it. You have struggled through your life and you have made success, you have achieved success, and you don't want to give them in a platter where they don't have a value for it. They would abuse it. I know a well-wisher over the years. I remember he telling me about his son. He said, even if I give you $500,000, I know you will blow it up in a day. And that statement struck me so vividly. He said that if I even were to give you $500,000, you will just blow it up in a day. So I will not do that mistake. I wouldn't want you to do that because I'm destroying you by doing that. You don't have the value for what is coming your way. So it should not be an impure, you're not trying to satisfy your own personal selfishness in the relationship, and that's not required. That's not should be. And just to conclude on this thought, what is the picture of renunciation the Shastras have portrayed? I will want to listen to each one of you all. What is your guess? A picture of renunciation the Shastras has portrayed. Whenever they talk of detachment, they have picturized it. And what is that picture of detachment? And it is not the lotus leaf in water. So think anything other than that. Arun Shravji, are you there, sir?
Yes, Guruji, I am.
Not able to see you, sir.
Okay. Sometimes.
If you don't mind. Yeah, that will be nice.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, thank you, for your great insights, Guruji. And this is my second or third, I think the second class. So I don't have enough knowledge really to respond adequately to what you're asking. But let me see if I can try.
Please. Yeah.
So the question was, what is the picture? Is that the question?
Yeah, the picturization, if you have to conceive what detachment is, the Shastras have always conveyed through various stories and parables and, metaphors. What is it that comes to your mind?
Sannyasa, I mean, the last phase of life that they talk about, right? Which is sannyasam or sannyasa, I guess.
Yes, you're right. Is that it?
You become a sannyasi, you give up all your material possessions and you dedicate your life to the divine. That's one picture, I suppose.
Okay. No, your thinking is right, but I'm afraid that's not the right picture.
Okay.
You've got the frame, but I'm looking at the picture. You've got the concept right. You've got the concept of sannyasa, detachment, but there's something else I'm looking at, I will be surprised if anybody in the classroom will get that right. And I have students who have been with me for 25 years, sir. So just because you're second class doesn't mean you got it wrong.
Paramatma, I mean, the abstract, which is, I guess, no, I'll stop there. I think I'd rather understand what the right answer is.
Not at all. I think your thinking is very much right. And it is something very, in fact, once you get to hear what's the right thinking, right answer, it will baffle you. And I'm afraid all will think, why was it not taught to me in the earlier days so that I could have conceived it and have believed in it and try to live or emulate it? See, because as you rightly say, Arunji, the concept of detachment is always portrayed to be of a life of a man, of a sannyasa, who wears an ochre robe or who lives a life of detachment, has given up his family, his material pursuits, his belongings, and wants to live in an isolation, an ashram, or some kind of a recluse. This is sadly the portrait of detachment. So, and if a normal man, a layman would want to emulate detachment, he say, am I to give up my loved ones? Am I to give up my belongings? Am I to give up all my success which I've achieved so dearly? Am I to renounce all of that and go off into the woods? No, I rather renounce that. I rather live with all this I have.
Yeah.
You see, this is the mindset.
But yes, I think I've also heard some stories about karam yogis who are people who can be detached but still be doing their duty. I don't know if that is the kind of detachment which, I mean, you could be detached, but you could still be existing in the material world, right?
Absolutely. In fact, the whole analysis of conveying what this detachment is, which we said is you are still engaged with your duties and responsibilities, but inwardly you maintain a charm because it is a spirit of detachment. It is a spirit of renunciation, not the act of renunciation. It's not physically separating, but mentally you are aloof.
Mm-hmm.
That is the real spirit of Vedanta. So you're right, Karma Yogis, in fact, you're able to come closer to what I'm looking at. All right? Okay, great. Very wonderful, sir. Very good.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, Srinivas ji.
It comes to me the picture of I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. That's the one thing which it immediately reflects in my mind.
Okay. So you're talking of your own picture here, huh?
Yes. Picture I get it from that because you asked me to that. What picture I get?
Right, I get what you're saying. Okay. Yes, Siddharamanji.
Janaka Maharaja.
Janaka, all right. Yes, the Shastras do speak of the great Janaka who lived a life of a royalty, literally a king, and yet he was a man of detachment, not a sannyasi arunjia. They talk of a man of a king who lived a royal life. You know what opulence is, royalty is, and yet they had that spirit of mental detachment of a sannyasi. And they are known as
Rajarishi.
Raja Rishihi. The strange combination of Raja and Rishi. You have the success and wealth, and yet you have the spirit and attitude of detachment of a Rishi. That's the beauty. Yes, but I was looking at another picture. You're not wrong, Setuji. Very, very correct. Yeah, Sudhakar Garu.
This is a picture of Gautam Buddha.
A picture of Buddha. All right.
A picture of Ganesha, who is totally detached with the outer world. He is completely concentrating on his own meditation. Even the mouse is looking at him and trying to disturb him that he wants to eat something. He is not bothered.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
No. Interesting. Yes. Vijayaraghavanji.
To me, Guruji, a picture of a river flowing comes.
Uh-huh.
A river flows in never mind whatever else happens. And the river flows because it has to flow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's within control, banks within control. I mean, okay, limited control.
Okay. I get that. All right. Okay. Anybody else? Hirenji, any idea? No idea. Anybody else want to give it a try? Yes, sir. Meenama can be given the access, please. Yes, sir. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
It's a picture of Krishna.
Picture of Lord Krishna. Okay. Yeah. He dealt with so much happening in his life, and yet, yeah, it's a picture of detachment, isn't it? Yeah, true. Not wrong at all. You would not be wrong to say that. Yeah, Vijaya.
Shiva, Lord Shiva.
What of it? What of him? Sorry.
Lord Shiva.
Okay.
Because eyes are closed and open a little bit.
That is there. Yeah. In fact, it is Lord Shiva, but not in the context as what Vijay has said. Lord Shiva, the picture of detachment is Lord Shiva sitting along with Parvati and dealing with his family chores of attending to the needs of Subramanya and Lord Ganesha. So Lord Shiva portrayed as a family man, thick and thin of dealing with his family affairs, is the symbol of detachment. I don't know how many of you have ever heard this, but this is how it is portrayed. The Shastras speak of it, of a man who lived, who was with his family. Shiva and Parvati had Subramanya and Ganesha as his children, and he had to deal with his chores, deal with his family, day-to-day things. And that is the picture of detachment. So in spite of being in the thick and thin of all his duties towards his family or whatever, yet you find they're completely above it. So one of the observation is when you see a deity, a god or a goddess seated, what do you see? What do you notice? Whenever any god or a goddess is seated, what do you notice? Maybe too much questioning going on today. Huh? Yeah, Jayama.
Hariom Guruji. One leg folded and one leg on the ground, sitting on a lotus.
Correct. Sitting on lotus or wherever, but seated with one leg folded, only one leg touching the ground. What's the symbolic representation? What does it symbolize, Ma?
Sorry, Guruji,
All right, no problem.
I'm at a loss to convey this.
That's fine. That's okay. Yeah, Hariji. Hariji said beautifully, rooted yet elevated. Very true. Very poetic, sir. Today you are. Huh?
Yes, since one leg is on the ground and one on the lap, he is partially meditating and ready to act anytime it is required, because it is on the ground. One foot is on the ground.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. You can say so, Hariji. Yes. Correct. Mickey ji. Yes. You want to say something?
It's almost like being at rest even when you're in action.
That is correct. Very true. So one aspect of it, your feet is down, means you are fully engaged in your duties and responsibilities. You would never abandon your duties towards your family, towards your society, to wherever you are needed. You do your duty. Action should not stop. The fundamental principle of Vedanta is action. Remember this. Remember, Bhagavad Gita was given to a man of action. It was encouraged Arjuna, who wanted to abandon action over emotion. He said, man, you have a duty to fight. You have a duty to establish dharma. So go out and do your duty. So wherever there is this wisdom, wherever there is this knowledge, action prevails. Action should never stop. And yet, when there is an attitude of detachment, you maintain that peace and charm while you're acting. So acting with peace. So physically one leg down means you're in it. One leg off means you're mentally attuned to the higher. You're off the fluctuations and vicissitudes and all that you're subjected to. Your mind is in the higher, you're physically in the lower. And that was the initial concept I started off talking in the class today. I said you're operating in the lower, but you're mentally attuned to the higher. So you will remain throughout your life, whatever you do, you will remain unaffected, you will remain detached. I keep reminded of this with the way our auto drivers in India, they drive, you know. So they'll have one leg folded, they're only operating the brake. And then they're going around the tuk-tuks the way they want. That the road belongs to them, you know. So there is no lane, there's nothing there. They are in their own worlds. They are kings of the roads. So there's gods and goddesses there, you know. So Hirenji, tamas mocks sattva. So many people who think who are sattvic are actually tamasic in nature. And the only difference between tamas and sattva, tamas mocks sattva because even a man of sattva is unconcerned, is unaffected. As you say, a tamasic person also is disinterested, don't care attitude. But the only acid test between whether you want to know whether you are tamasic or being sattvic. What is acid test? Setuji?
Action.
action. A man of sattva is in action. A man of tamas is in inaction. So you must learn to embrace these two ingredients of life, which is action and peace. And peace is only experienced in the garb of action, and that is through detachment. And this is the philosophy which should be roared to the world, so that the whole humanity can experience this. So they are able to live a life of dynamism and action, and yet maintain that peace and happiness within. This is sattva. So hardly anybody rises up to the level of sattva. They're just switching from rajas to tamas, tamas to rajas. Nobody ever comes to the level of sattva. They do not know what it is. Either you give emotion, get attached, or you don't share emotion. Hardly anybody understands to have the emotion and yet remain unaffected by the emotion. So does that settle something, Hirenji? Are you a little clear? All right. Perfect.